Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. Today I'm very excited because we're going to talk about a subject that is very close to my heart, which is the city of Delhi. And I was living there until a few months ago. And you've written a lot about the urbanization process of Delhi and the Delhi metro and stuff. But before we get into that, I just want to ask a more general, more broad question based on your research and based on your work. What do you think, what do you see as the defining features of urbanization, specifically in the post-liberalization period?
Yeah, so, well, thanks for having me. And I'm really happy to talk about Delhi and about urbanism. They're two topics that are also very close to my heart and to my research, of course. So I think in my mind, and I think in the mind of many people, the number one feature and issue of urbanization in the post-liberalization period is really climate and environment. In Delhi, of course, we see, flooding like we've never seen before. We have heat waves that the intensity is, even though, of course, Delhi's always been hot in recent memory, but it's intensifying. The heat waves are not only longer, they're coming earlier. And there are rising temperatures in general. So you have these extremes, which is the telltale sign, of course, for climate change and the environmental impacts of climate change. If we think about the original sort of sociological or anthropological definitions of the city, and those generally came from our ideas of 19th century cities. But I think there are still a couple of elements that are really true. And one is that cities are about density. There are more people in cities, right? That would probably be a definition that most people could agree on. But what does this density mean? Density is another way, I think, to talk about proximity. Why do people come to cities? For so many reasons, right? For jobs, for new communities, for shedding old identities, for creating new communities or connecting to old communities in new ways. We see this in India with the question of caste and caste associations historically. So proximity is about, the way I think about it, it's about people. You want to be closer to different kinds of people, maybe people that you couldn't even imagine being in proximity to when you were living elsewhere. So there's people, there's things, right? Cities, especially in the post-liberalization era in India, we can really think about, and not only in India, of course, the proximity to things, the availability of things. The consumer culture has become so much more intense. And of course, that is also connected to climate and the environment. And then the third area, which I think is really important, is ideas. When you come to the city, you are in proximity to new ideas and to different ideas. Ideas that may be exciting to you because they're new and you hadn't thought about them before or encountered them before, and ideas that can be challenging, right? Whether we think about identity, whether we think about education, there's so many new ideas, right? And so, how are these ideas circulating? How are people coming in contact with them? And how are they making more of their life with them, right? And so then, of course, that leads us to the question of, yes, there's proximity and there's density, but not everyone has the same access to people, to things, and to ideas. And so I think another question for post-liberalization cities, and again, for cities around the world historically and in the contemporary moment, is the question of, social equality, the role of the state, the role of the private sector. In India, with liberalization, we see so many private-public partnerships, right? And I think also another idea is, what what does the public mean? One of the reasons that I was drawn to study Delhi's metro was not only, the interest in a new technology, a new form of transport, all of that, um, but also in terms of circulation of people, things, and ideas, and how the metro was creating an avenue for people to get into the proximity of things they wanted to get to faster, but not only faster, also, to going to places in the city that maybe they hadn't thought about going to before, maybe they didn't know existed. So the metro is really an engine of that. It's not the only engine, and there are issues with it, which I'm sure we will get into in our conversation.
Yeah.
But I think these are really some issues. And I would just add to that, or develop that a little bit, to say that, with post-liberalization, we're seeing urban development as the concretization of cities to an even greater extent. And this has a lot to do with my area of interest, transport, because you need more concrete in order to enable more cars on the road.
Right.
And the explosion in car sales and people buying cars, families buying cars, and types of cars has really been a defining feature of Indian cities since liberalization. And so, of course, that leads us back to the question of climate and the environment and those heat waves and the flooding. So it's all, my point is that it's all connected. Yeah, and I guess the third sort of aspect of this is, thinking a little more, maybe even philosophically, about, what this greater consumption, consumer culture, proximity to new ideas and lifestyles, greater global awareness, what this does in terms of people's desires. The desire to have the latest marker of an upwardly mobile lifestyle, for instance, and the car again is a big part of that. So interestingly, in a different way, is the metro, right? And again, this was something of interest to me because the metro is a symbol. It's public transportation, but it's a symbol of certain kinds of aspirations as well. So I think there are many different kinds of symbols, but I would say the car has probably been a defining one, because it links to the kinds of urban development you see, and it sort of shows that urban development in India has been very top down, even though there are schemes for better buses, better this, better that. It's very elite. There's a lot of elite capture in terms of imagining what the city should be with, metro systems and flyovers. And so you have to wonder, okay, who's imagining this city and for whom?
Yeah, that's I want to like get back to this idea of imagine, like what we imagine the city as it is and what it can be reimagined as. But speaking about symbols, I've in the introduction of your book, I found this very interesting quote which immediately captured my attention. In the book, you write that a fraction of what it cost to build the metro could have been more effectively spent on making a world-class bus system which would serve more people, especially the poor and working class. But that was never the point. The government and the technocratic classes wanted a metro and they got it. So here there is this idea that the metro was not just about, more, like you said, not just about transportation. So if you could just explain that section and like really talk about like why did the government and the technocrats actually want the metro if it was not just about moving people?
Yeah. So, the urban planners, and there's so many different kinds of urban planners and technocrats, as you're saying, and obviously government officials and different ministries. Um, these are smart people. I've talked to many of them.
Yep.
They're smart and they're aware. And, in a city like Delhi, there are constant seminars and workshops about smart urbanization and about, all of the issues, including climate. Um, people from Latin America come and talk about the success of bus rapid transit and how it's created more equity in cities.
Yeah.
So people are aware. At the same time, there are pressures, again, from this elite capture idea to make Delhi a world-class city. And of course, world-class is, you can define that in different ways, but it has to do with the kinds of aesthetics that people associate with cities in the West, not only in the West, also in China, including Hong Kong and Shanghai and in Singapore. So there are examples. There's a lot of, cross-Asian, inter-Asian ideas of the global city as well. So of course the metro is about, moving people more efficiently, contraction of time and space, but it is also one of the most capital intensive and expensive kind of systems you can have. And so this, system really started with a partnership with the Japanese government, with an organization called JICA, which is a development organization that's part of the Japanese government. And this was about the investment of Japanese capital in India. The Japanese have dozens of projects across India. The metro is one small one. But the metro was very noticeable. It was kind of upfront. It was, immediately affecting people. People could literally step into the metro once it was built. And there was a desire for this kind of capital project, which it does serve people, definitely. It serves a certain sectors of the Delhi population, but it's always been more of a capital project than a people project, right? And so, buses are, if you look at many Latin American cities, they have really intensive bus rapid transit that are not only serving so many people, but going into the nooks and crannies of the city. That is not the kind of, shiny system that is going to draw investment in the way that a metro system can, right? So it was, that's why I say in my book that the metro was, of course it's a transit system, but it was really, the goal was to have a metro, was to have a city that had a metro. And that's why now, of course, in India, you see metros sprouting up everywhere because the city wants them. And partly, there are a lot of successes with the Delhi metro. When I started my research, through from the beginning to the end, people in Delhi who ride the metro love it. When I am riding the metro, I am loving it. It's clean, it's air conditioned, it's takes you from point A to point B in a third of the time. What is there not to like, right? So these things are tricky because it can be a good system and people can love it, but it cannot be the kind of system that's actually going to solve the issues of transport and the environment. And so you have this tension. The Delhi Metro has 10 lines and almost 300 stations now. I've also, in the last few years, visited and ridden the metro in big cities like Bengaluru and Chennai, but also small cities or smaller cities like Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad, of course, is a big city too. But also in Kanpur. I was in Kanpur and I rode the metro. It's one line. It's a handful of stations. Nobody's on it. They're renting it out for birthday parties because it's so expensive, right? So of course, once they build more of it, but even with the Delhi Metro, they keep having to raise the fares because they're, doing all kinds of property schemes and advertisements, which is fine. If you go to Hong Kong, they have the same kind of trains as in Delhi, and it's wrapped in advertisements. But it's never going to be sustainable financially. It will never be. And especially if they keep raising the rates to ride it, fewer people are going to ride it. So it's not sustainable in the way, or it doesn't serve the public in the way that a really world-class bus system would.
Like the tension that you described between, yes, it does have its, people who get on it, they love it, it's very helpful, but also there's this other kind of like top-down elite kind of idea And like I was thinking, like if you're being cynical, you can think that the metro is basically like a gigantic like giveaway, government giveaway to like private infrastructure companies and then financial institutions and all that. It's a real estate scam. It's all those things. But once a thing is there, I guess it does take a life of its own, and it has changed the city and the residents and stuff. So I would want in your all your experience, and you sat on the metro and talked to people on the metro so much. How would you describe that the effect that the metro has had on the citizens and how they relate to each other? And specifically, because this is also a big part of your book, how it relates to how women move and how they interact with the city around them.
Sure. So yeah, that is really the meat of my book, and what I try to really, document through the stories I tell. Um, so there are countless ways that it's affected people. So there are new ways that people are relating to the city through, at the beginning, I was just noticing through the use of maps, the Metro map, people didn't have an overall vision of Delhi. You had a vague idea of, okay, North Delhi, South Delhi, East Delhi, across the Yamuna, West Delhi. Okay, maybe, you have some landmarks. Obviously, there's so many, monuments, India Gate. But the Metro gave a different shorthand for the city. And so people were, you know, thousands and then millions of people were making new connections. And so in my book, I focused on, the micro stories because I was interested in not just the connections that I saw and was making, but I wanted to know, okay, what's someone who, is getting on the metro at Rotala? What are they experiencing? How do they view the city? Um, so the mapping was one thing. Another was the routines, how it changed people's routines. Um, and then another was the aspirations. So people had new ideas of what they could do and of what they wanted. Um, Another aspect were ideas about citizenship and government accountability. The metro is a big example. I mean, people really see it as an interface with the government, so a new interface with the state. And so it gives and gave people a new idea of not just the right to the city, but placing themselves within the city. That was what was also very intriguing to me is, on one hand, when you're on the Delhi Metro, 75% of it, as you know, is above ground. So you're seeing the city as you're going along.
Yes.
You're making connections about how things are in relation to each other, how they are in relation to you, the kinds of access that you have to things. You may see things on the metro that you never saw before. So one story I tell in the book is about a domestic worker who I'm riding the metro with. This is at the beginning of the book. And we're going along, and she's actually a new widow, and she's going to a government office in East Delhi to get her benefits for being a widow. And she's going there, and we're going along on the metro, and she sees we're just about to cross the Yamuna on the blue line, and you have a view of the World Health Organization office in Delhi, the regional office for South Asia. And I knew it was the WHO office because I'd been there before for something else. But we're going along. I'm not saying anything. I don't even notice it on this trip. And she turns to me and she says, "That is WHO, WHO." And she said, "They give recommendations for child's nutrition." I just, and I said, "Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've heard that too." We're speaking in Hindi, and
Yeah.
that was, again, it's just one small example of the kind of conversation. This happened to be a conversation with me, but also I'm very good at eavesdropping, and that's part of participant observation. So I would eavesdrop on conversations about the kinds of things people were noticing, and the connections they were making. So it's about access to the city. It's opened up the city for many people. Of course, the pillars all across the city also intersect with so many localities. For some people living in these localities, the metro closes things off. The
Yes.
metro is obstruction. The metro is in the way. The metro is a reminder of what the government can do when they have the desire and capital and, ability to do something for the commuting classes, but not for them and in their localities. So those kinds of distinctions and tensions are also part of the books of what I try to show in the book. And it always led me back to this question, is the metro freeing? Here you go, you're on the metro going fast. You literally feel yourself moving. In the US academic press version of the book, I call it the moving city because it is so much about the sensation of moving. So it's moving in different ways, right? The sensation of your body moving through time and space. But it's also about mobility, social mobility, and the idea of moving up. Is the metro going to not just give you transport mobility, but give you more social mobility to move up in the world, to move up in your life, right? That's why, to go back to this idea of cities and proximity and density, this is why people come to cities or why they stay in cities, is really about opportunities, quality of life, making something better for yourself and for your family. So is the metro freeing, or is it an impediment? All of that capital and expertise that goes into the metros, what if it had gone into, or in addition to, a world-class bus system? And in this regard, I think it's really important, and I talk about this in my book, to really see the metro as part of a larger transport landscape. Initially in Delhi, the metro, it was such a gargantuan project, right? A transnational project to build the metro. And it was the first one in the city. In India, of course, we know about the one in Calcutta, but that one was not a multi-line metro, and it was being built in a different way. This was a much more hyper-modern metro system. And they were so focused on it, on the engineering of it, on the, literal excavation of the city so they could build it beneath, above, that they really thought of it as this kind of pristine standalone project. But within a few years, they quickly saw that if the metro is not connected to other forms of transport, it is going to soon become worthless, because everyone has, multiple places to go, and they need to go into the nooks and crannies of the city. And so, they talk a lot about last mile connectivity, but it's about more than that. It's about that, but it's also about having a system that takes you from one form of transport to another, right? So if you go to Tokyo, as many Delhi engineers and urban planners did, because of course the loan and a lot of the expertise is coming from Japan, right? In the early days, you see how it's seamless. You go from the Tokyo train to a bus, or to your bicycle, or to, a road that you can safely ride a bicycle on, or a road that you can safely walk on. So there's, it's a different imagination. Ever since, I would say from phase 2 in Delhi, they've been trying to play catch up, but it is a struggle to this day, and they have not mastered it. They have not created the connectivity and this really integrated transport schema that they need to do for the metro to reach its potential. And of course, going back to the capital intensive part, guess what? So many of the stations already have to be redone because they're falling apart. That's because, there's so much you have to do for upkeep to keep the metro not just running, but to keep it safe. So these are going to be long-term issues that they're going to have to deal with, not only in Delhi, but of course in all the cities that they're putting this capital-intensive metro system. And this question of the metro landscape, the larger transport landscape, is as important in, Kanpur and Chennai and Bengaluru than as in Delhi. That is part and parcel of what really what a metro is and if it's going to make sense to have one in your city.
I was thinking about like there's a part in the book where you talk about the movie Delhi 6 and how that has a song sequence in which Sonam Kapoor goes into the metro
Yeah.
washroom and she changes and then she
Mm,
comes out and she's like, she's going out into the city. So there's that there's an idea, that idea of anonymity and that freedom that you kind of escape from your old Delhi kind of ways and you can go into the city. Especially coming back to the idea of like how it has
mm,
changed women's mobility in the city.
yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think that was probably one of the initial sparks I had for the project was when I was writing it really for the first time. And this is after 30 years of being, visiting Delhi, living in Delhi for different periods. So as someone who went around the city a lot pre-metro, the first time I wrote it, I was a joyride, like most people. Um, but really, one of the first thoughts I just had was, wow, this is going to be very consequential for women. Um, and the reason I thought that was, not only that it's shiny, new, clean, whatever, everybody likes that, but it was brightly lit, very brightly lit. The lights, if you think about walking around Delhi in the evening, right? Even this term eve teasing, right,
Yeah.
comes from the evening. That's when it happens because the light becomes low. And that's when it's, I guess, easier to harass somebody. You think you're not going to be seen or something. I don't know. So the metro offers this enclosed, brightly lit, and surveyed environment. You have to go
Yes.
through these turnstiles. There are cameras. There are security guards. There are a lot of other people. It is like no other transport in the city. The buses are dark. The streets, as I said, get dark very quickly in the evening. And so this was a new kind of container in which to move in the city. This is even before the ladies' coach. The ladies' coach came several years after the metro first started. So that was one thing, the sense of safety. Um, the ladies' coach, when that came in 2008 or 9, on one hand, a lot of women in the city were against it, right? Um, the idea that it reinforces patriarchal norms. Why do, here the metro was going along fine and men and women were sitting next to each other on the trains, and that was a good vision for the future of the city. Thinking about, public spaces where you could have this kind of, you know, kind of more equal space where people felt safe and all of that. Um, and I have to admit, I was also one of the people that kind of just thought, oh, it's kind of going along fairly well. And like there's not a flood um, of issues in terms of harassment, not at all. There were some, but not so many. Um, and I kind of went along with that idea. I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to start doing research in the ladies' coach as well. Of course, I was interested in it. And I talked to many women in the ladies' coach and outside of the ladies' coach who ride in the general coaches. And what I was surprised to really hear is the number of women who said they would not ride the metro unless there was the ladies' coach. And so that made me think more about this question of mobility. And mobility is also, not just feeling a sense of safety, but also a sense of legitimacy. And for a lot of women, they felt that the urban space kind of opened up for them a bit more. Now, this also has to do with class. It has to do with families, and a lot of students ride the metro. A lot of college going people ride the metro. Um, so you have a lot of like middle class norms that are also put into the metro space. Um, at the same time, the ladies' coach, I think, can help subvert some of those norms in terms of increasing the number, but also kinds of women who
Mhm.
use public transportation. So what I would like to say is that, I hope one day Delhi doesn't need to have a ladies' coach.
Yeah.
But for the moment, I think it does serve to make it to increase mobility rather than decrease it, even if it also is, you know, bringing up those patriarchal norms as well. But maybe something is also happening in that subversion. That's what I would like to think.
I mean, that's kind of ties in very well into like, I just want to close out, just like the final question I want to ask is like, there's so many different ideas, contesting ideas about what different people want, a city like Delhi to be.
Mm,
There are this, the elite side of it, which wants more car-based infrastructure,
mm,
gentrification or whatever we call it, beautification. And then,
mhm.
there are people who want to conserve it, conserve the heritage and all of that. And people want to make it less hostile and more inclusive. So just to, what do you think, which direction are we moving in? And is there any, way to kind of maybe alter the course, maybe a little bit one way or the other?
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's a good question. I think really to address the question of, inclusivity, and also issues around climate, which really affect everyone, air quality, heat, water, flooding, everyone is affected, even if poorer communities and communities that have less structures around them, fewer structures around them are impacted much more. But I would say we need to move away from infrastructure as spectacle, and instead really, to echo what I was talking about before, really prioritize integration and access. And that's good for everyone. If we have increasingly cities that are, you know, gated away and separated, we know, especially in Indian cities, you can never be that separated. We are integrated. You
Mhm.
know, the middle and upper caste households are completely dependent on
Yeah,
people living in the poorer
yeah,
areas. We all know that.
yeah.
So there really has to be more integration, um, and more respect for the imaginations of people who are not elite, their imaginations of the city. I think we need more participatory governance. That's a big one, and that's a
Yeah.
tough one.
Mm.
um, but in order to have more affordable and extensive transit networks, more pedestrian friendly planning, most people in Indian cities still walk. That's the
Yeah.
number one way of getting around. um, and, we have to really reckon with the structural inequalities when we're designing urban systems, because otherwise they will come back to bite us.
Yeah.
It's not that doing it the, way we've been doing it has resulted in the cities that we want to be living in.
Yeah.
Even I was recently in Bengaluru visiting for the first time, actually, and I was riding the metro and having a look around. And there are many, nice things about the city, but wow, it is concrete, concrete, concrete. That is their idea of development.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised actually to see the extent of it. So I think, making cities inclusive means thinking beyond the elite visions of the world class. It means asking the different stakeholders and groups of, who is the city for? And I think sustainable urbanism has to be rooted in social justice and not just technological efficiency. And that social justice question is, again, because of, to go back to the original idea of, cities as being about proximity and density, we are all in this together. And so we need to figure out ways to make cities sustainable for everyone.